Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The United Arab Emirates' founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, always spoke about the environment, the importance of it, our reliance on it, and what we must do to protect it.
The environment, he said, is a part of us and we are a part of it.
We must respect it, he said, because we need it to survive, and so will our children and the generations to come. Marhaba, welcome. Let's have a look around our country, the United Arab Emirates. You can find us on the gentle shores of the Arabian Gulf, close to the equator, and on the other side of our mountain range, the Arabian Sea. We've lived here for over 7,000 years, and over that time, we've got to know the place very well. We've had to in order to survive.
We have learned to live sustainably with our desert companions of the sky, land, and sea.
Like our country's fellow inhabitants, we've learnt to adapt to a harsh environment. Our winters are cool, where it's on average 15 degrees Celsius, and our summers are hot, like really hot, where it can get up to over 50 degrees Celsius. Traditionally, our families spent the winter months in cooler areas like Liwa or El Ain or in the mountainous regions.
Others, young men, took advantage of the warm summer waters to dive for pearls on the coast.
In the winter months, our coastal communities would flourish, where they would harvest our bountiful waters for fish and, on occasion, dugong. These gifts of the sea were consumed. The surplus was salted using salt from the salt pans and were traded with tribes of the interior for dates, charcoal, and other commodities. This exchange of resources, also known as mubadala, linked us with the land and the sea, generation after generation.
Back then, our people's demands were simple and needs were few. And it was like this for as long as it can be remembered, until the 1960s and 70s, where everything changed.
We, Bedouins and fishers, discovered that under our golden sands, we're a resource-rich people. Over 46 years ago, our country didn't exist. It was known as the Trucial States and was split in different sheikhdoms and emirates. Nobody knew what the future held for our humble desert dwellers and coastal fishermen.
As often happens when a people's future is unclear, in a time of need, a leader emerges.
Sheikh Zayed traveled the desert caravan trading routes, and one by one, after negotiating with the leaders of the tribes, he united our people. Together, we all joined under the leadership of Sheikh Zayed and formed our country, the United Arab Emirates. Things have changed a lot since those days, when Sheikh Zayed united us all.
Our hut that were made from palm fronds has turned into modern villas.
And some of those have got tall, like really tall. Our desert caravan routes have grown, and our way of getting around is now a little bit faster than it used to be. On our coast, our trusty vessels have been fitted with modern motors.
And in the air, well, our love of birds, especially our falcons, has morphed into plains.
We're from a country to be proud of. And this year, 2018, celebrating 100 years since his birth, we owe Sheikh Zayed our thoughts, our prayers, and our honor. We are the same people who have welcomed visitors from far and wide, generation after generation.
I am one of those travellers who feels very welcome and grateful to call this place home.
We three work at the environment agency, Abuظbي,
where we work every day to preserve Sheikh Zayed's legacy.
We are truly inspired by the late founder Sheikh Zayed's legacy. His love for the environment, his care for species, his interest for the global commons is something that we take great pride in. At the Environment Agency Abuظbي, we are an organization that takes pride in the work that we do in the environment, and we also institutionalize the founder's vision. This year, as we commemorate the Year of Zayed, we did something truly special. We had 3 of our ambassadors literally go to the end of the earth. And through this journey, our aim was to raise awareness on 2 critical issues. The first, climate change, and the second, plastics, and particularly the single use of plastic.
Going to Antarctica is a really huge deal for me. I was born in the UAE, a 46-year-old country, and I saw its development, I saw its growth as I was growing up. My ancestors had a very different life to mine, and even my father's generation was raised in a world drastically different from my own. Nowadays, the UAE has women across all sectors, from ministerial positions to aspiring space travelers, and I really hope that going on this trip is an opportunity to dismantle stereotypes about women in the Middle East.
It's a dream of mine to go and see the biodiversity and the wilderness of Antarctica. Secondly, I want to understand better from the expert in this field, the climate change, and to know more what's happening in that area so we can take it back to our home and share it with our colleagues and communities.
Team Zayed is motivated to rise to the environmental challenges of our time: climate change, global warming, and our throwaway uses of plastic. It's choking the magnificent creatures of our oceans.
I'm inspired by the team going to Antarctica, Rashid, Winston and Mariam. I know that their work will have a lasting impact on the way the people of the UAE and further afield will view the world's environment.
We're in Ushuaia. We arrived yesterday. It's the very edge of the world in Land's End, Tierra del Fuego. We've got our solar lights. We're going to unpack them out and then we're going to take them outside to give them a little charge. We really wanted to do something to honor Sheikh Zayed's legacy and came up with the idea of taking solar lights with us to Antarctica. As we tested them, we made a plan on how we could use them to honor Sheikh Zayed and his love for the environment. If we could use solar energy for a purpose in Antarctica, we could use it anywhere.
Now, I am not an explorer. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm actually just a survivor. I became the first person in history stupid enough to walk to both poles. This expedition is absolutely unique. I started this in 2003, probably before some of you were born. Now, what is unique about this expedition is that this is the last IAE Antarctic expedition. This is it. We're never doing this again. And you are the last group that will ever be under the IAE TEP banner going to the Antarctic. Now, that's a lot of responsibility on you. This expedition is about one thing, and it's about you. And it's about your story, and it's about your life, and it's about your hopes, and it's about your dreams. So I ask you very simply, for the next period of time in your lives, if you can, disconnect to then reconnect. So when you go home, you are better leaders than you were starting from now. And you will be going to the most beautiful place on Earth. In 24 hours and 25 minutes, we set sail for the Antarctic down the Beagle Channel.
The day was finally here, with the added responsibility of being the last ones to go on the International Antarctic Expedition with our new friends. We headed to the ship with excitement and a sense of purpose. Our vessel, the Ocean Endeavour, looked seaworthy.
On the expedition, I'm most concerned about delivering the Zayed light show. It was quite a process to get the lights down here to Isha. We've checked them out and they work, which is a good start, but pulling together a light show on the moving deck of a boat in the freezing cold at night, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but it's something that Team Zayed are up for.
As we cast off and headed into the unknown, our stomachs were turning with nerves, excitement, trepidation, and fear of the unknown. We were feeling all of these things.
The Drake Passage is an incredible body of water because you have two oceans meeting, the Pacific and the Atlantic, and you have waves coming from very, very deep to very shallow very quickly. So it's not unheard of to get waves up to 30 metres high. It feels a bit like the calm before the storm here, to be honest.
I'm really excited about crossing the Drake's Passage. In a couple of days, we'll be crossing the Antarctic Circle.
So it's 7 o'clock in the morning, day one, trying to cross the Drake Passage. The cold is noticeable. My hands feel like they're about to fall off. The sea's pretty rough. We're between 10 to 15 metres. It's been pounding against the boat all night. But if you look out behind us here, we've got the magnificent albatross, the ocean wanderer.
These birds fly all across the Southern Ocean, with the Great Pacific Plastic and Garbage Patch right in the middle of their range. This is an area of rubbish nearly 3 times the size of France. Seeing them up close made us even more determined to do something about plastic pollution.
the ship was incredible and it was hard to keep your footing. Not a soul was on deck that afternoon, except for Team Zayed from Abuظbي.
Team Zayed, we're going south!
By day 2, with our footing a little steadier, we unpacked our solar lights. It appeared that they were charging, even through the window. So we've just come to near the end of the crossing of the Drake's Passage. It's been quite a tumultuous past 48 hours. I reckon 80% of the group have been in their rooms. I was really afraid of being seasick, but luckily it seems to have missed me. And we're just about getting closer to Antarctica, and we're all extremely keen to get there. The nerves we'd felt when we left the Middle East had turned into a real feeling of adventure. We all gathered at the front of the Ocean's Endeavour as we approached the Antarctic Circle.
We've just done something that is rarely part of any expedition that we do. We've crossed the Antarctic Circle, which puts us truly in Antarctic territory. We are now south of 66 degrees latitude, 33 minutes south. So this is very special for us. How does it feel to have come this far south?
Awesome, it's surreal.
We're here to celebrate and to reflect James Cook, the brilliant navigator and mariner. 1774, 17th of January was the first human being known to have crossed the Antarctic Circle on the second circumnavigation of the globe. And we've arrived on the history and on the shoulders of so many brilliant explorers who contributed to geographical knowledge, also contributed to the spirit of adventure.
This is the first iceberg we've ever seen. It's the first one we've come across on our way to Antarctica. What a beautiful welcome to Antarctica this is.
It's beautiful. Russia, first iceberg. We made it. Reckon wide.
That was a long journey. I never thought it was going to end. It's quite an emotional moment.
Seeing all of these icebergs made us think about climate change and how what we were doing in other parts of the world was leading to the melting of this incredible place, Antarctica.
We awoke that first morning to the most magnificent sight we had ever seen in our lives. Antarctica, the great southern unknown, lay before us. Some of its inhabitants gave us a glimpse of what was still to come. We were in awe of the beauty in front of us. Then the call came to come and explore. We put on our warmest clothes and headed to the boarding platform. It was time to get back to sea level. After the Drake Passage, it felt strange to be welcomed by a calm and serene sea. Who knew that ice could be so mesmerizing? As we headed towards the shore for our first landing on the Antarctic continent, we thought about what we needed to do to protect this place.
Hey everyone, so I was just saying, great dock, life jacket bag. You find there's lots of snow on the route. The flag route goes down. There's an open perimeter down on the deck, so down on the bottom there. Again, it's what you're putting here as well, a lot of snow.
We made it to the continent, finally.
First step. Welcome to the continent of Antarctica.
We made it! It was a proud moment to put our Environment Agency Abuظbي flag on the Antarctic continent. We reflected on how far we had come, but also what we were here for. To let people know back in the UAE about this place and how we needed to change to ensure both Antarctica's and our future.
First time on the Antarctic continent itself. I've walked, 10 metres, and I've met the inhabitants.
98% of Antarctica is covered in ice. That's 1.9 kilometers thick.
Antarctica is the highest continent on Earth.
Just to give you an idea of scale, Antarctica is 14 million square kilometers. That's twice the size of Australia, and you could fit the UAE here 168 times.
It's the only continent without a native human population. We've got between 1,000 and 5,000 researchers here, and it's incredible that they're just here for science.
Even though it's ice, we get more rainfall in the UAE than here.
It's the place for a few records. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth.
Right here on the Antarctic Peninsula, the greatest diversity of species is found because the climate is generally warmer and wetter than elsewhere in Antarctica. It was worth the hike. You can see penguins, squaws, seals, cormorants. As I stood there, taking in the biodiversity, an Arctic tern flew by. Yes, that's right, an Arctic tern. I stared at it in wonder. Every year, it flies from its Arctic breeding grounds to here in the Antarctic and back again. That is a 19,000-kilometer return ticket. The long journey ensures that this bird sees 2 summers per year and more daylight than any other creature on the planet. It made me think that everything is linked, all biodiversity in different parts of the world, from terns moving between the Arctic and the Antarctic to our green turtles in the UAE, moving between Abuظbي and Oman. What we do somewhere would always have an effect somewhere else. Antarctica must have known that we are coming.
Because there's a Z in the rock over here.
Z for Team Zayed in Year of Zayed. We're now in Wilhelmina Bay. This ship, named the Enterprise, had wrecked in January 1915 and was part of the whaling trade. Antarctica is an unforgiving place.
Crab eater seal, which you can find here. it is a young male, and they're called crab, but they do not eat crabs, they eat krill, which is like small shrimps. And hopefully we're gonna take pictures of these shrimps.
We're floating amongst a lot of ice. There's the most beautiful sound of the ice crackling under the rain, and it's truly something else. It's all going to be iced over in a month from now, so in April, and we can slowly start imagining it because of all of the ice formation and water. Absolutely incredible. The main reason Her Excellency Razan and Dr. Jane sent us to Antarctica was so that we could find out about climate change, what it means for all of us, and the environment. The next crisp Antarctic morning, we asked David Hone, Shell's Chief Climate Change Advisor, about what was happening and what we could do about it.
So David, tell us a bit about the climate change and if it is real.
Well, I can assure you that what's happening is real. So what we're seeing over the last 20 to 30 years is a rise in the average surface temperature of the world. All the evidence points to that being the result of the rising level of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is the result of humans' use of fossil fuels, of various industrial processes, and all the changes we're making through agriculture and land use.
Tell us how climate change can affect the UAE.
We've shifted the whole distribution of temperatures, and we'll start seeing more and more extreme temperature events. Now, I think the UAE is already challenged by extreme temperature events. You know, when it's 45 or 50 degrees outside, it's quite difficult to function. So if you have more days like that, or days where it even gets a little bit higher, that becomes a problem. The average temperature may be fine, but it's more and more of these extremes. I think one of the longer term issues is sea level rise. So if we warm the system up another 2 or 3 degrees C, over the next several hundred years, because this won't happen overnight, we could see 7 to 10 meters of sea level rise. It is a long-term issue that I think all countries, including the UAE at sea level, will have to face.
The projections made by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, are that if the current rate of emissions continue throughout the 21st century, sea level rise will be around 1 metre by 2100 and will continue for centuries after. Up to 3 metres by the year 2300 is considered a conservative projection. How much sea level will rise by depends on how much we reduce emissions by. If emissions continue unabated, we could be looking at around 1 metre by 2100. Antarctica is the sleeping giant of climate change and sea level rise. Within this continent, right down at the bottom of the world, there is enough water in the ice to increase global sea level by 60 metres, and the giant is waking.
Our ignorance, our lack of knowledge, sometimes our greed, has often led us to neglect this, to argue that first we develop, then we worry about the environment. Well, as we all know, with climate change now becoming a reality, we have learned that we can only pollute the atmosphere up to a point with 7 billion people, and then nature has its way of coming back at us. What we are now facing in the coming decades is an extraordinary reinvention of our entire economic infrastructure because of just 100 years of pollution that we did not understand would have such consequence. These 100 years in some ways are a nanosecond in the history of this planet. And yet we have actually managed, in that very brief moment, to begin to affect the atmosphere, as we had done with the ozone layer.
All over Antarctica, the ice shelves are breaking up and glaciers are retreating. This needs to be of concern to everybody on the planet. This is because these ice shelves act as dams and protect the glacial ice of the continent. Without the ice shelves protecting the glacial ice, which is a real worry in West Antarctica, sea level rise will accelerate.
David, why is it so crucial for the UAE to be part of action against climate change?
The simple reason that this is an issue that is global. It's not a local issue. It has effects locally, but the only solution comes from dealing with a global commons problem, which is what the rise of CO2 in the atmosphere is. Now, we've only got about 40 to 50 years to resolve this problem, to bring emissions right down to zero, to net zero globally.
I want to pay tribute, particularly also to the United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi, in having become one of the pioneers in promoting renewable energy. Not only in hosting IRENA, having Mazda here, but also in investing in developing economies in making this technology accessible.
In the UAE, at least 20% of our energy in the future will come from solar energy. As we checked on our solar lamps, which were charging even in the Antarctic, perhaps we considered that the future of global energy was right under our noses. The next morning, as we all again took in the magnificence of Antarctica, I couldn't help but feel a little somber by what David had told us. Climate change was happening and right in front of our eyes. We needed to work out what it meant for communities across the world, our home the United Arab Emirates, and the incredible biodiversity we were seeing around us. We were on our way to a penguin colony. There are 18 species of these funny little creatures, penguins, and all of them live in the southern hemisphere, and 4 of them in Antarctica. They also live a dangerous life, as we have seen, having to avoid the likes of orca and leopard seals. On land, they also have to watch themselves, where their main predators are skuas and sheathbills. And in the long term, these beautiful and endearing creatures are also at risk of climate change. They are already experiencing its harsh reality.
I have a huge passion for penguins. Since I was a kid, I've been seeing them all over the TV, in newspapers, magazines, and now I can see them in real life in their real habitat. There are some guidelines that we need to abide, for example, staying 5 meters away from them, but that doesn't always work. I mean, they are curious little things. They come to you and bite you and try to see what you are.
Changes in sea ice extent are the immediate greatest threat facing Antarctic penguins, particularly the emperors and adeles. Where the temperature is warmer and sea ice is decreasing, on the West Antarctic Peninsula, there have been declines of Adelie penguins by 80% since the 1970s. Also on the peninsula, an entire colony of emperor penguins disappeared. For this charismatic species that we all fell in love with in Happy Feet, and which nests on sea ice, projections for the future are dire. But it's not true for all penguin species. The gentoos that we saw at Peterman Island are increasing in number. It is thought that this is because they are generalists and live on the peninsula all year round and are more likely to be able to adapt their breeding to temperature changes, compared to the migratory Adelie and chinstraps, who leave the sea ice during winter and stay at sea until spring. It appears that for the 4 Antarctic species of penguins, like it is for us humans, the effects of climate change will not be the same for everyone. Like the gentoos, we will also need to learn to adapt.
This area, the Antarctic Peninsula, by science, is one of the places that scientists say is seeing the biggest impact of climate change anywhere on Earth. And if you ask the penguin experts, you ask the animal experts, they're being affected too. So it is definitely happening here. And I see changes every single year, either big or small. What I saw on Petermann Island with that slushy ice and the river coming down hit me the hardest this season. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959, where there were 7 countries who were claiming Antarctica. The British and the Argentinians and the Chileans. The British came down and put some bases to say, hey, this is ours. And then the Argentinians came down, put some bases, and then the Chileans put some bases, and everybody was arguing. And then somebody saw sense to say, hang on a minute, let's sign a treaty and put all these claims to one side. So the claims still stand, but let's start afresh and say that Antarctica should be a continent for science and peace. And it's been the most successful treaty probably ever since 1959. Then, in the 1980s, Jacques Cousteau began to feel that people were talking about possible exploitation, maybe starting in the ocean first and gradually, as exploitation always does, creeps in. And let's never forget that in the 1850s, we were down here slaughtering millions of seals, hundreds of thousands of whales. So we've already exploited Antarctica. And when you go to Deception Island, you'll see that and feel, really quite upset about it. So the treaty and the renewal of that treaty and the protocol will happen between 2041 and 2048. So our job is twofold: to make sure young people know that we need to keep this place as it is, get the UAE to sign up to that treaty, which I think is important. If they do it, lots of the other Gulf regions will follow suit. And secondly, or thirdly, use enough renewable energy back in the real world, which is, if we use more renewable energy, it won't be worth financially coming here and exploiting this continent. 30 years ago, I was the first person ever to walk to both poles. And this time my son Barney, at 23 years of age, and his father will undertake a journey only surviving on renewable, clean energy. For 600 miles, we will walk to the South Pole.
South Pole, buddy. Whoop, whoop. As we work our way up to the plateau, it's a reminder of what's to come. And she's not easy. So this is the final march, Dad. What's it feel like?
As far south as it's possible to go anywhere on Earth. Can't go through all this suffering and battle without it meaning something. We have to really make this mean something, Barney, because it's hurt us. It's hurt you more than it's hurt me, but it's hurt us both to make this happen. Let's make that special. It'll be good to be at the pole, Barney. Job done.
It's the most magnificent place I've ever been in my life. And one thing we've been talking about a lot is plastics and our use of plastics, particularly in the UAE, single-use plastic water bottles. And plastic bags. We use millions of these every year. We use them once and we throw it away, and, the odd one ends up in the ocean. Okay, and these beautiful animals, the penguins,
and whatnot, they actually eat that and it ends up choking them.
13 million tonnes of plastic waste enters the ocean every year, and it can take up to 1,000 years to decompose. According to the United Nations, over 600 marine species have been adversely impacted by plastic and marine litter, with 15% of these species having an endangered status.
So it's a little bit emotional talking about it, but it's changed. Doing that sort of thing was never okay in our parents' generation, using something once and throwing it away, so why is it in ours?
Plastic bags, plastic bottles, coffee cups. We can all do better. Use your own. Set the example. What can you change?
So one of our many challenges we're gonna have is to reduce the single-use plastics to save these creatures behind me. I mean, come on, look at them. And this is our duty now to save this place.
It's a really unique opportunity to be here in Antarctica. And I would like to encourage all people from the UAE and around the world to get in touch with their natural habitats and to spend time in nature.
Into the space.
Roommates and paddleboard buddies.
Everybody is completely zipped up. Everybody is clipped. PFDs, awesome. Ready to rock?
Ready to rock.
Here we go.
I was so excited to be paddleboarding in Antarctica. I felt like I could be doing anything. As I balanced on the board, I kept a wary eye out for leopard seals and orca, but I soon forgot about them. The magnificence of this place was awe-inspiring.
You're doing so well.
My feet is numb.
Very proud of you guys.
Did someone see that?
We've had 3 minke whales come through just past us. We've got a penguin colony here. Seals have been sniffing about.
So I'm really proud of Miriam looking as ever elegant on her board in the middle of the Antarctic. Crazy people.
The day paddleboarding will stick with us all forever, particularly after having seen those whales. Like seals and penguins, Antarctic biodiversity is now protected, but this wasn't always the case.
The South Shetland Islands are a group of Antarctic islands lying 120 miles north of the Antarctic Peninsula.
You can't take a video here. It's like a mini drink.
They are thought to have been discovered nearly 200 years ago in 1819 by the British, who observed the great abundance of seals and whales. The word of these natural riches soon got out. A handful of sealing ships arrived in the 1819 summer. And this island, Deception Island, became the rendezvous point, with nearly 100 ships arriving the very next year. Within a few years, the fur seals in this area were hunted to the point of extinction, as was the elephant seal, which was hunted for its blubber and oil. An estimated 1 million fur seals were killed in the Antarctic islands for the fur markets in London and China. It is thought that only a few hundred survived. And by 1825, Deception Island was abandoned. But humans weren't finished with the exploitation of Antarctica. 80 years later, in 1904, the whalers came south. and set up a whaling station at this place, with several hundred whalers resident here. It is amazing to think that this was just over 110 years ago. The baleen whale populations of this region, of which there are 6 species, declined. And like the sealing industry, humans had hunted most whale species nearly to the point of extinction. Humpback whales were targeted initially, and then the faster swimming blue whales as technology increased. The blue whale, the largest animal thought to have ever existed on planet Earth, growing up to 30 metres long and bigger than even the dinosaurs, were decimated. Of an original estimated population of 225,000 blue whales before their exploitation, today there are less than 2,000. As the blues declined, the next largest species, the fin whales, were targeted. After they declined, it was the sei whales, and this slaughter continued until the whalers got to the smaller minke whales. It is considered that in the wider Antarctic, over 1.3 million whales were killed during the whaling days. Like the blue whale, these whale populations are now a fraction of what they once were. As we explored Deception Island, it was easy to be overwhelmed by the history of the place and what we humans had done to the seals and whales that used to be here in abundance.
The little whalers brought in their whale catch, perhaps pulling 2 or 3 whales, dead whales behind them on little whale catchers. And then the whales were pulled ashore right here onto a big wooden area where men, actually, they didn't have that many machines in those days, the flensers attacked the whale carcasses with huge long knives on the ends of sticks. And then the blubber was put into these machines here to boil it down. The bones were put into there, everything was put into there. And once that was done, it was all stored into these tanks here. And then when the tanks were full, a whale oil tanker would come and then take the whale oil north back to civilization.
Yet overwhelmingly, there was a feeling of hope because realising what we as a species had done. In the 1970s, the global parties with an interest in Antarctica came together through an international convention. There has been no commercial sealing in Antarctica since then, and from remnant populations of a couple of hundred fur seals in this place back in the 1920s, the fur seals have recovered with a global population now of between 5 and 7.5 million. It took a little longer for whales to be protected, but in 1986, an international moratorium was put in place for the great whales. In 1994, the Southern Ocean Whaling Sanctuary was also established to give these magnificent creatures their best chance of recovery. And like we saw on our paddleboards, there has been some recovery.
Look, in 50, 60, 70 years, this place has just gone from very few whales to spouts everywhere. It's incredible. It just goes to show what the global community can achieve when we all work together. So reflecting on the expedition, while we've got some really big challenges, global warming and plastics, I'm actually really filled with hope because we've done right by this place, and I think by working together we'll solve these huge issues that we're currently facing. That was amazing. I was down here for about half an hour trying to get the seals with the Year of Zayed and Environment Agency flag, and one of them's just flopped up and planted itself by the flag, and I got the shot of my life.
Leaving the South Shetlands filled with hope, we debated amongst our new friends on the expedition what the challenges of today, plastics and climate change, meant for not only us in the UAE and as a global society, but also for these inhabitants of the Southern Ocean that we had got to know well.
With our 90 new friends from 20 countries on the expedition, concerned about what climate change and plastics meant for our future, from the likely relocation of whole countries to unfolding environmental tragedies, to supporting people affected by extreme weather events. On those final days in Antarctica, we, ambassadors from all over the world, came together in this, the Year of Zayed, and agreed to put the world on notice by sending you, yes, you in the world, a message from Antarctica. Tonight we're launching the Zayed Solar Light Show. So this year is the Year of Zayed, and we'd like to celebrate Sheikh Zayed's legacy and to send out a message to all of the people in the UAE that have inspired us. We all need people to inspire us and encourage action. Our first word is Aham Zayed, the Year of Zayed. Year of Zayed.
Khalifa bin Zayed.
Mohammed bin Zayed.
Hamdan bin Zayed.
And as we're doing this moment, Team Zayed from Abu Dhabi are actually firing this up. It was their idea to bring this, to light this up and take home a very strong message home. Great job. Wonderful. And Inch now is going to play us a little song.
Hi from Antarctica. Hi from Antarctica. Hi from Antarctica. Hi from Antarctica. Please believe me, this global warming is out of control. So is plastic use. Please listen. Oh, individuals and countries around. Stop, think, and act. Be the fight, be the fight. Be the light, be the light. 'Cause it's not done till it's 2041. Be the light, be the light. Be the change, be the change. 'Cause it's not done till it's 2041. We can change, we can change. We're the change, we're the change. Oh, we can change, we can change. Oh, we can change, we can change. Oh, we can change as we light up the road.
We will ask you to walk to the back of the room and collect your solar lamp, your Zayed torch. And before you do that, just take a moment and consider what you're going to do with it. Because when you pick that up, it's a commitment to go and do something amazing in each of your communities.
With this torch of Zayed, we renew our commitment to the legacy of our founder, Sheikh Zayed, in protecting the environment for people's well-being and a better life for all.
I want to use this as an example of sticking to your dreams and not letting them go. That's what I want to use it for.
I'm going to take my torch and bring it to my industry, which is the music and arts industry. I hope to spread the message of sustainability in it.
I want to bring active solutions that can really make an impact with CO2 and sustainable development.
I'm going to be influencing policymakers and helping to inspire change makers to help us transition to a low-carbon economy to help protect Antarctica and our planet.
I'm going to take the Zayed solar light into the office and maybe at one of the team meetings share it with everybody and show it to them and show how efficient it is and how it's actually starting to change people's lives.
Talk to more people about renewable energy and solar energy and wind energy and get more people involved into its development, into its use.
Use it as a motivator for me to help spread the message of sustainability.
I'm going to take that light and I'm going to light up everybody's life with it, and it is my guiding force from here on.